In the mid-90s, Khaled Mashal, who at the time led the political wing of the Palestinian movement Hamas, was based in Amman, the capital of Jordan. There, he effectively coordinated the external activities of the organization, which already had a significant network of influence both within the territories and beyond them. In 1996 to 1997, Israel suffered a series of attacks, mainly in the form of bombings carried out by individuals acting from ideological motives. Dozens of civilians were killed. In response, Tel Aviv began searching for key figures it deemed responsible for the strategic planning behind these actions. The Israeli intelligence and military political leadership concluded that eliminating Meshaal, as a man who was not only a spokesperson but also a coordinator of certain decisions, could significantly weaken Hamas's influence. This wasn't about making a symbolic move, but about a concrete assassination meant to serve as a warning to other high-ranking members of the organization. This decision led to the development of one of the riskiest foreign special operations by Israel in decades. After the decision was made on both political and operational levels, Mossad created a separate task force responsible for carrying out the mission: the elimination of Khaled Mashal. The intelligence leadership considered options that wouldn't lead to direct confrontation with Jordan, a country that at the time had a valid peace treaty with Israel. So the plan had to be covert: no traces, no gunshots, no loud explosions. It all had to look like a regular accident or a sudden medical incident. Experts decided to use a nerve agent, an extremely toxic biochemical substance, developed in such a way that it had no smell, no color, and no visible signs. This type of agent had no known link to any specific army or country, so the trail wouldn't directly lead back to Israel. The substance was to be administered by spraying a few microdroplets near the ear area, which would produce the fastest effect by penetrating the central nervous system. This method wasn't chosen by chance. In such a case, even after an autopsy, it would be extremely difficult to determine the true cause of death. Two operatives with combat and intelligence experience, who had previously taken part in difficult missions abroad, were selected to carry out the operation. One of them was supposed to spray the substance, pretending to be a passerby who had accidentally bumped into the target. The other was to provide cover, block the view of the bodyguards, or distract them if needed. Both acted with absolute precision, having rehearsed their movements, distances, and duration of contact in advance. To mask their operation, they entered Jordan through a third country using forged Canadian passports under fake names. Their identities were so meticulously crafted that even border checks raised no suspicions. Their documents contained plausible biographical details, previous travel records, contacts, and even fake phone numbers which were actually connected to front offices. Alongside the agents was another part of the team: logistical support. They monitored the target's movements, managed technical support, communication, transportation, route planning. One of the cars parked near the scene acted as a mobile command center. Inside there was equipment for surveillance, encrypted communication, as well as medications and evacuation tools in case of an emergency. Just a few hours after the operation, the agents were supposed to leave the country, unnoticed, without a trace. In case of failure, several backup plans were in place: sheltering in diplomatic facilities, changing appearance, and deploying an intervention team waiting for the signal outside the capital. However, as it turned out, even the most thoroughly planned scheme can fall apart when it meets reality. On the morning of September 25, 1997, everything in Amman looked normal. A street near the Hamas office, everyday traffic, a few bodyguards, the same ones who accompanied Khaled Mashal daily. It was right there on that ordinary stretch of sidewalk where one of Mossad's boldest operations was set to take place, and where it failed. Meshaal arrived as usual by car. As soon as he opened the door and took a few steps toward the entrance, two men discreetly approached him. One of them held a small object in his hand, something that looked like a case or a mobile device. It was a specially designed capsule with a micro nozzle for spraying the substance. The task was simple: get close, pretend to trip or bump into the target, and in that moment, press the button to release the toxin near the ear. The second agent followed the plan. Create a distraction. Maybe drop something, block the guard's line of sight, shift their focus. But things didn't go as planned. One of the bodyguards noticed the strange behavior. The overly close approach to Mashal, unnatural movements, and a look of tension in the man's eyes. He immediately shouted, and within seconds, a struggle broke out. One of the agents managed to press the spray, and a few drops landed in the ear area of Mashal. But visually, no one noticed. It looked like a scuffle. The bodyguards reacted instantly. They subdued one of the attackers on the spot. He was completely caught. The other one ran, heading toward the Israeli embassy, hoping to reach diplomatic grounds that offered immunity. But Jordanian security forces had already been alerted. The man was intercepted just a few dozen meters from the gate. While the struggle continued, Mashal took a few steps but quickly began to stagger. His condition deteriorated visibly. At first, it looked like dizziness, but within minutes he began to lose coordination. His speech slurred and his body weakened. He was urgently placed in a car and taken to the hospital. Doctors couldn't understand what was happening to him. There were no visible injuries, only symptoms resembling massive intoxication or an unknown attack on the nervous system. As medics fought to save the patient's life, Jordan's security forces launched a massive operation. Interceptions, searches, identifying contacts. After establishing the identities of the two detainees, they quickly tracked down several others nearby in a car. Their cover stories were falling apart. Passports, behavior, routes, everything revealed a systematic preparation. Meanwhile, the Jordanian government realized it had just been subjected to a blatant violation of its sovereignty. And more importantly, an attempt had just been made on its territory to assassinate a person who, although hostile to Israel, had not violated the laws of the country he was in. This wasn't just a failed operation. It was a diplomatic explosion with consequences far beyond Amman. After it became clear that the attempt to eliminate Khaled Mashal had failed, the situation immediately took on a global dimension. Amman found itself at the center of an international crisis, not only because of the assassination attempt itself, but because of its consequences, circumstances, and the actors involved. King Hussein ibn Talal, a monarch known for being a calm and thoughtful leader, had personally invested political weight in the peace process. That's why, when he was informed that a special operation had been carried out on his land, organized by an ally and without any prior warning, it was taken as a personal insult. When the king learned that Khaled Mashal had been poisoned and was in critical condition, he didn't waste any time. Through a direct line, he contacted the White House, speaking to then US President Bill Clinton. His message was straightforward. If America's closest ally in the Middle East is acting like an assassin on our soil, then we will reconsider all agreements, including the peace deal. The king demanded immediate intervention. He made it clear that if Israel did not provide an antidote, Mashal would die. And this would not only be a diplomatic disaster between Jordan and Israel, but also between Jordan and the United States. It wasn't just about saving one man's life. It was about preserving the diplomatic structure of the entire region, where every agreement was fragile and built on personal promises. The Jordanian government presented Israel with a direct choice. Either you immediately provide the medicine that will save Mashal's life, or all detained agents will be tried in a public court, and every detail of your actions will be exposed. Additionally, the king declared that the 1994 peace treaty might be reconsidered, essentially hinting at its termination. Meanwhile, in Washington, intense behind-the-scenes negotiations began. American diplomats tried to ease the tension, but Clinton was forced to align with Jordan's position. Allowing the death of a Hamas leader, especially after the Mossad operation had been exposed, was absolutely unacceptable. Israel, which initially denied involvement and remained silent, found itself trapped. Mashal's life was in their hands, but the cost of hesitation could be a political earthquake. After the agents were captured and Jordan issued a sharp ultimatum, Israel was in an unprecedentedly difficult situation. Initially, officials in Tel Aviv stuck to the usual stance: complete denial of involvement in the Amman incident. They expressed surprise over the arrest of supposed tourists with Canadian passports and avoided any comment about Mashal's condition. However, behind closed doors, the pressure was mounting. Washington demanded immediate explanations. King Hussein was firm. He wasn't just threatening to cancel the peace treaty with Israel, he had already begun taking real steps toward that. A signal had been given that Jordan would recall its ambassador from Tel Aviv. freeze all bilateral programs, and publicly accuse Israel of committing an act of international terrorism. At the same time, Jordanian doctors continued to fight for Meshaal's life. His symptoms were unusual. He was losing consciousness, his breathing became difficult, and he experienced uncontrolled nerve spasms. None of the medications were helping. Eventually, it became clear. This was the effect of a specific chemical compound, a formula known only to those who created it. Then came the demand that pushed the Israeli government to the wall. Either you immediately provide the antidote, or your agents will face public trial, and the world will hear all the details firsthand. And peace, it's over. At this point, Bill Clinton personally intervened. He had a direct conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The pressure from an ally, the anger of the Jordanian king, and the looming threat of a major diplomatic conflict all took their toll. Israel admitted the failure of the operation and was forced to hand over the antidote, the only one that could stop the poison's effects. This antidote was not publicly available. It had been developed by Israeli experts specifically as a countermeasure to a certain series of nerve agents. Only they knew its formula, and only they could guarantee its effectiveness. The vials were delivered to Amman under guard, with dosage calculations and instructions for local doctors. Meshaal was saved just in time. He spent several days in critical condition but gradually began to recover. But even that wasn't enough to repair the diplomatic damage. King Hussein demanded more, a public acknowledgement of responsibility and a symbolic gesture that would reflect the true cost of the failure. Israel had to agree to release Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the founder and spiritual leader of Hamas, who had been in Israeli prison since 1989 serving a life sentence. Yassin was a symbol of resistance to many Palestinians, an intellectual inspiration behind many of Hamas's actions. His release represented an extraordinary concession from Israel. Until that moment, the possibility of an exchange hadn't even been considered. But in this situation, the Israeli government had no other option. The decision was made. Yassin would be freed in exchange for Meshaal's life, the return of the agents, and the preservation of peace with Jordan. Thus, one secret operation turned into one of the biggest defeats in Mossad's history. Not only tactically, but geopolitically. After the dramatic events of September 1997, the consequences of the failed Mossad operation were far-reaching, complex, and deeply felt in both diplomatic circles and the psychological and informational space. This wasn't just a failure. It was a blow to one of the most respected brands in global intelligence. Let's start with the most important point. Mossad, long regarded as infallible, a near-legendary instrument of Israeli power projection, suffered a reputational collapse. Unlike dozens of operations the world only heard about through memoirs, this one failed in full view of the planet. The agents were captured alive, their identities exposed, documents confiscated, the use of a nerve agent proven, and the target survived and later spoke publicly. For Israeli intelligence, this was the first public failure of such scale since the 1973 Lillehammer killing, when Mossad agents mistakenly assassinated an innocent man. Let us know in the comments if you want to hear that story on our channel. But unlike that incident, the operation against Meshaal happened in a political context where every move had international consequences. Canada, whose passports had been used by the operatives, was furious. The use of its documents without permission not only jeopardized its own intelligence and consular services, but also put real citizens at risk. The Canadian government demanded explanations and guarantees. Israel was forced to officially promise to stop using foreign passports in overseas missions. This also prompted a review of cover methods in other countries. Intelligence services around the world were closely watching the fallout. But the operation had its biggest impact in the information war across the Middle East. Hamas, which until recently had been in a tough spot after internal purges and repression, suddenly had the perfect narrative. One of the world's most well-armed, professional, and experienced agencies had failed to kill their leader. More than that, he survived, and the rival state had to heal him with its own antidote. Khaled Mashal, who had previously been more of a behind-the-scenes coordinator, became a symbol of resistance. The media compared him to those who had survived assassination attempts and come back stronger. His image was actively used in Hamas propaganda as the man who wasn't broken even by Mossad. This strengthened his position, and within a few years he became the head of Hamas's political bureau, the organization's top body, coordinating strategy, international relations, and ideological policy. Another crucial consequence was the release of Ahmed Yassin. For many Palestinians, this wasn't just a political victory. It was nearly sacred. The Hamas founder, a paralyzed preacher seen as the voice of spiritual resistance, returned to the public stage. His reappearance was viewed as a miracle. People greeted him in the streets, he spoke in mosques, gave interviews, and continued to inspire new generations. Yassin remained active until 2004, when Israeli air forces carried out a strike on him in Gaza as he returned from prayer. But even his death didn't erase his image as a living legend. And it was the Amman operation that gave him a second life in the eyes of his followers. For Israel, this story became a hard strategic lesson. It forced a reassessment of how operations were conducted in allied or neutral countries. They realized that even perfect logistics and technical superiority mean nothing if you ignore the political context. Since then, Israel's intelligence has become more cautious in its methods, especially in nations where even a small misstep could trigger an international domino effect. The operation against Meshaal went down in history not as a heroic intelligence mission, but as a textbook example of how one act, meant to show strength, can turn into a global loss of influence.